Picture this. A 19-year-old college dropout manages to build a sprawling, seemingly revolutionary healthcare empire completely from scratch. And she does it so well that she successfully fools the world's most powerful politicians, billionaire investors, and seasoned business leaders. Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unpack exactly how that happened. We'll look at how the promise of a total medical miracle morphed into one of the absolute most dangerous corporate frauds in modern American history. Okay, let's get right into it.
$9 billion. That was the peak valuation of Theranos. So how exactly did founder Elizabeth Holmes create a massive company valued at $9 billion using medical technology that, well, as we know now, literally didn't exist? To figure that out, we really have to look past those crazy numbers and examine the brilliant, yet kind of chilling, psychology behind her pitch.
Part 1. The billion-dollar blood lie.
This whole story starts with something incredibly relatable, actually. A simple human phobia, the fear of needles. Dropping out of Stanford University at just 19, Holmes set out to solve this exact problem. She initially called her company Real-Time Cures, but she quickly realized the word cures might trigger some early skepticism, so she pivoted. She smashed together the words therapy and diagnosis to create a new, ultra-scientific-sounding name, Theranos. Her bold promise was super attractive. She was going to make blood testing cheaper, way faster, and most importantly, totally painless.
And her proposed solution sounded like absolute magic. The whole pitch rested on a portable, toaster-sized machine called the Edison. The workflow was supposed to be completely seamless. You just get a tiny little finger prick for a single drop of blood. That drop gets popped into a portable cartridge inside the Edison, the machine wirelessly beams the data to a lab, and boom, you get instant digital results right from the comfort of your couch. She pitched this as the ultimate disruptor, completely democratizing healthcare for everyone.
But behind closed doors, that promised technology was nothing but a mirage. See, while Holmes was out there boldly telling the public and her investors that the Edison could run 192 different disease tests from that one single drop of blood, the grim reality was entirely different. The machine routinely failed. It broke down constantly, and it could barely scrape together 12 tests, and even those were wildly inaccurate. In real life, to actually get any sort of usable result, they often had to quietly fall back on traditional, painful syringe draws anyway.
Part 2. A culture of paranoia.
So you might be wondering, how do you keep a secret that massive from leaking out of your own labs? Well, Holmes and her second-in-command, Sunny Balwani, essentially engineered a terrifyingly toxic workplace rooted in deep paranoia. They actively siloed their own teams, making sure the engineers building the machine literally couldn't even talk to the chemist testing the blood. Theranos installed continuous CCTV cameras to watch the staff, slapped keyloggers on company computers to track every single keystroke, and totally blocked internal chat apps. Security guards even escorted employees to the bathroom. They forced everyone into extreme non-disclosure agreements, keeping top-tier corporate lawyers on speed dial to aggressively threaten and silence anybody who dared to question why the Edison machines were failing.
Part 3. The Walgreens illusion. Now, hiding a broken machine in a super-secretive, heavily guarded lab is one thing, but the true danger really kicked in when they decided to roll this fake technology out to the general public. Despite knowing for a fact that it was broken, Holmes orchestrated a massive 2013 partnership to put Theranos testing centers directly inside Walgreens stores. Just the sheer perceived credibility of partnering with a huge, trusted pharmacy chain allowed Holmes to raise an additional $400 million from investors. These wealthy backers had a serious case of FOMO, fear of missing out. They just assumed that if Walgreens was on board, the tech absolutely had to be totally legitimate.
But how on earth did they handle real, actual patients at Walgreens if the Edison was a total dud? Well, they created a horribly reckless loophole. Patients would show up expecting that magical, painless finger prick, but instead, they usually just got their blood drawn via a regular painful syringe. And because Theranos was so obsessed with using tiny sample sizes to maintain the illusion, they actually diluted the patient's blood samples to puff up the volume. Then, they loaded these compromised samples into standard FedEx trucks and shipped them off to a secret lab where they ran the test on regular, third-party commercial machines from other companies. They completely bypassed their own useless Edison devices.
This is the point where it wasn't just white-collar corporate fraud anymore. This was literally playing Russian roulette with human lives.
That desperate logistical cover-up of shipping blood in hot commercial delivery trucks resulted in clotted blood and completely ruined samples. Because they were heavily diluting blood to force it through machines not designed for it, perfectly healthy patients across the USA started receiving devastatingly false medical diagnoses. We're talking about innocent people receiving entirely fabricated cancer diagnoses, or being told they had serious life-altering conditions they didn't actually have. All of this just to protect a Silicon Valley startup shiny valuation.
Part 4. Manipulating the elite.
How did seasoned regulators and brilliant billionaires totally fail to notice this massive deception happening right under their noses? It comes down to the fact that Holmes was an absolute master at exploiting psychological herd mentality. Think of that classic psychology experiment where a group is asked to judge the length of a line on a board. If everybody else in the room confidently gives the totally wrong answer, the subject will often ignore their own eyes and just agree with the group. New investors ignored their own glaring doubts because heavyweights like Henry Kissinger and former Secretary of Defense James Mattis were already sitting right there on the Theranos board. They thought, hey, if these guys trust her, she's got to be the real deal, right?
To pull investors in even deeper, Holmes weaponized this meticulously crafted Steve Jobs persona to basically charm Silicon Valley and completely bypass traditional due diligence. She wore identical black turtlenecks every single day. She pitched the Edison as the iPod of healthcare. She even hired Apple's former marketing firm and fiercely insisted on having meetings with them strictly on Wednesdays, just because that's what Steve Jobs used to do. She even used an artificially deep, fake voice to sound more authoritative in a highly male-dominated industry. At the end of the day, people weren't investing in a real medical device. They were basically investing in the cosplay of a visionary genius.
Part 5. The whistleblowers step up. But an elaborate illusion built on intense NDAs and daily intimidation can only hold up for so long. The dam finally cracked, and it was all thanks to young junior employees like Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung. They saw the horrifying reality of what was actually happening in those labs, and they absolutely refused to prioritize corporate profit over patient safety. Even while facing insane private surveillance from Theranos, literally having private investigators follow them around town, and getting hammered with relentless legal threats, these whistleblowers bravely leaked the truth to Wall Street Journal investigative reporter John Carreyrou. They risked absolute financial ruin just to do the right thing.
Part 6. The House of Cards. Once Carreyrou's massive investigative exposé hit the press in 2015, the $9 billion House of Cards immediately began to collapse. You just cannot fake clinical medical data once the eyes of the world are actually focused on you. The unraveling was incredibly fast. Surprise regulatory inspections in 2016 rapidly confirmed the devastating extent of the fraud. Regulators found that critical tests, like the one for syphilis, were only sitting at about 65% accuracy. That means over a third of people taking that test were getting the wrong diagnosis. By 2018, Theranos was officially dissolved, and Holmes was indicted on serious fraud charges, leading to a highly anticipated criminal trial in 2021.
During that trial, Holmes actually took the stand and desperately attempted to pass the buck to pretty much everyone else. She blamed her board of directors, she blamed her own employees, and she specifically targeted her former romantic and business partner, Sunny Balwani. She claimed he heavily controlled her and clouded her judgment, trying to paint this picture of a well-meaning entrepreneur who just, didn't realize how bad things were in her very own laboratories. But the jury completely rejected her narrative of naive self-delusion.
Despite bringing in a powerhouse defense team estimated to cost over $10 million, she walked out of that court a convicted felon. She was found guilty on 4 counts of intentionally defrauding investors. And get this, each one of those counts carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years in federal prison. The prodigy who promised to completely revolutionize healthcare and save lives was finally held accountable for deceiving the entire world.
Now, ironically, there was a massive red flag hiding in plain sight from the very beginning of this saga. As a crazy, fascinating footnote to this whole disaster, Elizabeth Holmes's own father had actually been a vice president at Enron. Yes, Enron, another untouchable corporate giant that was famously destroyed by one of the most historic and devastating corporate fraud scandals of all time.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we're really left with a chilling thought to take away. Silicon Valley is practically built on a culture of fake it till you make it. We constantly celebrate these founders who push boundaries and bend reality to build the future. But when we're dealing with human health and real medical diagnoses, the stakes completely change. When exactly does blinding ambition and that massive pressure to innovate cross the line into deadly criminal deception?